take us through where we're at the moment. Obviously, this is as of Monday, the 16th of March. Now, we also saw quite a bit of a response out of South Africa. Barry, you are in Johannesburg in South Africa. Take us through what happened and what's been announced.
Yes, so in South Africa, we've always been watching this go around the rest of the world for the last couple of weeks, but only in the last 2 or 3 days at the time of recording has people really started to take this really seriously. As we sit here today at time of recording, we have 61 cases in South Africa, majority across Gauteng, KZN, and the Western Cape. But we expect those numbers to go much higher over the next couple of weeks. So I think South Africa are right in the beginning period of this. And as a result, Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, came out yesterday and announced via press conference all the various measures they're putting in place to try and stop this outbreak. And I think it's been quite well received because the measures are quite strict and they're quite stark and they really do conform to what the rest of the world is thinking when it comes to social distancing.
Yeah.
And so it was quite reassuring to hear him say the things he said. What is typical of a South African press conference, it started 2 hours late again, so that just happens on all of these things, which I find bizarre every single time.
Yeah.
But basically, once he finally got there, he made the declaration that it's called a state of national disaster, which is a synonym for national emergency in other jurisdictions, right? So in accordance with that legislation, what that does is it allows funds to be released that were previously kind of ring-fenced for these sorts of things, and just again kind of reiterates how serious this is for South Africa.
Definitely.
And kind of the quote that I pulled from his speech, Chad, was he said, "As we have said before, the current circumstances require extraordinary measures to curb the spread of infections. Countries that have heeded the call to implement these radical measures have fared much better than those who do not." So it's a real proactive move from South Africa, and I think it's been well received here. I think that a lot of this caution is needed, and especially in South Africa, we're quite early in the process. We've only got 60 cases so far. It's a really radical move. And some of the nitty-gritties there, Chad, he's asked for all schools to be closed and all universities to be closed. He's asked for all gatherings of 100 people or more to be stopped or banned. So that's music concerts, bars, stand-up comedy, like everything you can think of that's more than 100 people has been banned. They've banned travel from all the various countries that have the highest rates of infection. So that's the UK, it's Italy, it's Iran, it's South Korea, Germany, Spain, China, and the US. So no travel is allowed to come in from those countries. So they've cancelled any visas of people coming in from there. They've also established a National Command Council to manage this crisis, and they're going to meet 3 times a week to try and coordinate the response and speak to the country as a whole. And all of these things are being put in place quite suddenly when you think about how the South African press has been talking about this. We've been talking about it as a faraway thing, kind of a thing that's happening around the rest of the world. In very few days, a lot has happened here in South Africa, and I think a lot's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. I think we're right in the middle of the first start of the exponential curve here.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a little bit jealous there, if you'd like there, Barry. I mean, you guys aren't even top 10 on the list of infections. Like you said, 60 cases in the whole country. In London alone, there's about 410 cases at the moment. And, we haven't done anything like this yet. Cutting the travel, obviously a key one. I think that's incredibly proactive. Look at the nations who have been most effective and cut all of that travel out. In terms of, closing schools, we've obviously spoken about how kids spread viruses and how that perpetuates throughout the population. And so for me, I think fantastic response there from South Africa. This is, for me, really the way that all leaders should be going. Hopefully everyone else kind of takes note. In terms of the next thing, and I suppose the thing that's really, really important now is, being in South Africa, Barry, what do you think? Do you think this kind of approach is actually required at this stage? Do you think it's a little bit too much too soon? Do you think this is going to be effective in reducing it, or do you think there's actually going to be a problem still?
So I think it's very crucial for us. I think we have to be proactive as a country because we have our own unique constraints and our own struggles here in South Africa. What I'm very wary of and why I'm quite concerned about this is the fact that the South African public health system is shaky at best. Even at the best of times, we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough beds, and the kind of the service and the system doesn't work as well as it should. And so what I'm concerned about is if we see the numbers that we're seeing in Italy and the UK and the US and whatnot here in South Africa, is our public health system going to be able to handle that? And what is going to happen to those people who can't get into hospital or can't get into these public services? And so we have to cut this at the knees as quickly as we can. So this kind of proactive measure is very important because it kind of speaks to the fact that we understand that South Africa is not in the same position as the US or the UK or whatever when it comes to medical support. We don't have as strong a medical support and as strong a medical system. And so whatever happens to us is going to hit us way, way worse than some of the richer countries around the world. And so it's a very important piece of information. I think that as South Africans, we have to take this quite seriously and do our best to ensure that we cut the spread as quickly as we can, because we can't afford a peak that's going to overwhelm our systems.
Absolutely. I mean, especially if you look at the sort of levels of poverty in South Africa as well. How well received do you think it's going to be if some sort of lockdown type scenario in terms of the workplaces as well, especially because we know a lot of the South African workforce is informal. Do you think they're actually going to take this seriously?
Yeah, so that's the sad thing about this. It's not about whether they take it seriously or not. It's whether they can afford to actually do anything about it, right? Yeah. So the unfortunate fact is that it's going to privilege those people who are in the wealthier tax brackets and who are in a position where they can work from home, or they can take unpaid leave, or they can kind of self-isolate themselves, and they'll survive this. But like you say, those people who are in poverty, all the people who are on the borderline of poverty and rely on day-to-day work or waged work or kind of paycheck-to-paycheck work, they might not have the flexibility to be able to say, I'm not going to go into work tomorrow, because else how am I going to feed my family? Yeah. And so I think in South Africa we have this big struggle where the huge income gap and the inequality there is going to come into full sunlight once again, and really show that this virus is going to kill a lot more poor people than it's going to kill rich people. And so as South Africans, we have to do our best, no matter where we are on the economic ladder, to stop this in our tracks as best we can, to try and save the people who are less vulnerable than us. It's not about saving people like me, like I'm going to be fine. It's about saving our fellow South Africans who aren't in the fortunate position to have the kind of resources they need to go and get private healthcare, or to be able to work from home, or to be able to take 2 or 3 weeks without a salary. The vast majority of our population can't do that. And so it's all very well saying no mass gatherings, no shops, no whatever. It doesn't help if you need that money to survive. And so as South Africans, we're going to face a big struggle the next couple of weeks, and how we act as citizens and as individuals is going to determine how bad things are going to get.
Completely agree there, Barry. One of the other things that I've seen happen is a bit of mismessaging, really. I've seen it on Twitter. I don't know where it comes from, but I think it's worthwhile pointing out and worth chatting about. Like you said, I think a lot of these people won't be able to afford isolating themselves for 2 weeks. But on the other hand, a lot of people are being miseducated. And so if you look on Twitter, there's been some mentions that certain demographics are more immune to this disease. And what I'm really worried about is that a lot of people don't take this seriously enough. A lot of people listen to what they're seeing on Twitter. I mean, I've seen dancers kind of, making a joke of this situation. And so I'm worried that element of it as well, results in people not going into self-isolation, not practicing care when cleaning their hands and making sure that they don't come into unnecessary contact with other people. And for me, that's really an interesting point, and that's really a point that can make quite a big difference in the spread of this disease in those regions.
Definitely. I think that the misinformation and kind of the propaganda going around is terrible, and I don't want to condone any of it. I think it's very important that we are very careful about which sources we consume our information from, and try and get it from the most reliable sources possible. Don't listen to some guy on Twitter who's saying X, Y, or Z, because there's thousands of those conspiracy theories, there's thousands of those things go along, and people are just profiting off that fear, right? They're profiting off the kind of the concern and the uncertainty in the marketplace. And so I think it's important for all of us to take that information as seriously as we can, and think carefully about where we are reading things from and who we are taking as advice seriously. When it comes to the dance, I think, Chad, it's actually important to have a little bit of a sense of humor. Like, one of the things that makes me love South Africa is that when that dance video came out that you're chatting about, so basically what happened was, at the press conference, Cyril Ramaphosa spoke about no handshakes anymore, we must now do this elbow bump thing. And within seconds, it was memed all over the country, and lots of songs about the elbow bump and whatnot. And I think that sense of humor is important. That sense of humor is what's going to get us through these tough times, I think. And as South Africans, I don't want to put a stop to that. I think that that's an important piece of South African culture. But it's that fine line, like you say. It's like taking it seriously enough to actually put the physical health measures in place and wash hands and isolate and whatnot. But also keep your morale up so that you can survive a 2, 3, 4 weeks state in isolation if need be.
Yeah, completely agree with you there.
Across the pond with Barry and Chad.